Jeff and Emil, if we need to go through a little bit more about what the Fed did in 2007, 2008, and their policies since then, in order to fully understand what happened in 2019, then maybe we should start in 07, 08, and how the Fed reacted to the situation that you just described, specifically in the mortgage markets.
Well, first of all, the Fed, I mean, they did what they always do. They went to the central banker's playbook, which is, again, the modern central bank, not the actual central banker's playbook. The modern central banker's playbook says you got to make people happy. You got to make people optimistic. So the first thing they did was cut interest rates. And you step back into the situation I described to you, which is really one among the more vanilla type situations. It actually gets incredibly more complex from there. But even from there, you can understand, how does cutting the federal funds interest rate target help in this situation? It obviously doesn't. So that didn't work. The Fed cut its interest rate starting with actually October 10th or August 10th of 2007, when they lowered the prime credit, which used to be called the discount window. And then they said, okay, that's not working. September of 2007, we'll start cutting the main federal funds target rate. That didn't help. So we get to December 2007. Now they're starting to think this is really a big thing and it's not going away. Nothing we're doing is helping. So they did two things. They did something called the term auction facility, which just auctions off bank reserves on an allotted basis. And they did these overseas dollar swaps, which is essentially the term auction facility, but in overseas central banks auctioning dollars. The dollar swaps actually refer to swap lines between the Federal Reserve and foreign central banks, because the Fed didn't want any credit risk of any foreign bank counterparty. But by and large, as you pointed out earlier, guys, the overseas dollar swaps are nothing more than, let's try to get some bank reserves outside the United States, which the problem wasn't necessarily bank reserves. There was no shortage of bank reserves because nobody used them. The shortage was mostly in collateral as well as balance sheet capacity, which gets into credit default swaps and derivatives and all sorts of other things. So the Fed continued to try to step in ways that it didn't help by them stepping in. And they even invented new ways, stuff that had never been done before, like a primary dealer credit facility, which was introduced in the wake of Bear Stearns' near failure, which if you look back on a lot of charts, you look back at the history of the global financial crisis, what you'll see is that Bear Stearns was maybe the point of no return. Now, the Fed thought it was successful. They congratulated themselves for what they thought was going to be the worst of the crisis, because they had successfully avoided the worst case in their minds for Bear Stearns. Let's have JP Morgan buy it at a cheap rate. Everybody's happy. But all the dealers across Wall Street said, yeah, Bear Stearns didn't fail, but all of the management and equity in Bear Stearns got wiped out. So that essentially punctuated the downside danger for all of this Eurodollar stuff that everybody had been taking for granted for decades. Now suddenly it was very real. I can be Bear Stearns. I need to really cut back on what I'm doing. As a dealer, me cutting back and de-risking my balance sheet means none of this stuff that used to go on before, the collateral for collateral swaps, the transformations, these MBS securitizations, liquidity backstops, commercial paper markets, all of these things started to go belly up because dealers were cutting back in the wake of the Fed's continued failure. Didn't matter what the Fed did. The primary dealer credit facility was one way of the Fed acknowledging this problem in collateral, shortage of collateral. That didn't really help. Emil and I talked about the Lehman Brother emails where the Fed was absolutely convinced this PDCF was going to be great. And what was it, the contact with Vice Chairman Dudley, or I forget who it was, got an email from somebody in Wall Street who said Lehman Brothers is going to fail no matter what you guys do. And of course, that's exactly what happened. So it was, not go into every little bit of detail here, but the Fed was aware of how things were failing, but just could not figure out a way to fix it because, again, the original sin here was the banking evolution outside the United States, outside the Fed's jurisdiction, in all these various forms that aren't really recognizable as traditional money. And the Fed just thought, well, if we have this psychological manipulation game, maybe that'll be enough if things start to go wrong. And as we found out starting August 2007, psychological manipulation doesn't really help when you have a real monetary shortage. So the Fed continued to try to figure out a way to fix it, but it was sort of like square peg and round hole.
So it's the the Fed and the authorities have always characterized Lehman as the authorities allowing Lehman to fail. But I think that's a mischaracterization from what I understand, right? They tried their best and used all the tools at their disposal to prevent Lehman from failing, but it was revealed that the emperor had no clothes and Lehman went under because actually they have no tools at their disposal that can help to manage a cascading global collateral call in the Eurodollar market because they do not have tentacles that extend directly into those markets.
Yeah, and I think people misunderstand what happened there. Bear Stearns too. Lehman, Bear Stearns, AIG, they didn't fail or nearly fail because they lacked cash. They lacked collateral. Every single one of them was taken out by J.P. Morgan, was tri-party repo custodian, said, "You've got a lot of junk that you're posting as collateral. I don't like this junk. The markets for junk is crap. And if you default on the cash loan and I have to sell this junk, I don't know what price I'm going to get for it. And if I don't know what price I'm going to get for the collateral, I can't accept it in repo." And it's not just cash repo, it's derivatives, it's any number of financial transactions that need to be collateralized. And so JP Morgan knocked on Bear Stearns' door and said, I think it was $6 billion in collateral that they knew Bear Stearns didn't have. And when they said collateral, I need treasuries. I don't need the more of this junk. I want some treasuries tomorrow, or I'm cutting you off of tri-party repo, which essentially means you're out of business. And that's where Bear Stearns was, hey, Fed, help me out. Lehman Brothers was in the same situation. It had borrowed a number of collateral. It had used crap collateral all throughout its balance sheet, as everybody else did. It wasn't like they were doing something nobody else was doing. Everybody had done this because they thought recency bias, confirmation bias, that there's no downside. This is repo. It's the safest thing possible. So when JP Morgan said to Lehman, I think it was $8 billion in collateral tomorrow, that's when the Fed had to step in and do all these other things. AIG was a somewhat different story, but again, same thing, because it had been borrowing treasuries from the regulated insurance company, or at least AIGFP had done it. Then when the insurance company said, I got to have these treasury back, AIGFP didn't have any more collateral to post. Again, collateral calls came and they don't have anything. So to prevent absolute fire sales across all of these balance sheets, that's when the Fed tried to step in. That's why the Fed created Maiden Lane and took some of the credit default swaps, some of the other assets off of AIG's hands before they really had to sell them because AIG could no longer fund them. So when we're really, oversimplifying, but really step back and look at the big picture of 2007, 2008, it wasn't really subprime mortgages so much as it was a collateral shortage that led to a bank run on collateral. When you really look at what happened, it really looks like a traditional 1930s style bank run, except that it isn't customers converting their deposits into cash. It is lack of collateral and forcing banks to scramble into U.S. treasuries, mostly T-bills in particular, in order to just continue to liquefy and fund their balance sheet activities and keep all of these complicated transactions alive.